Welcome to another edition of Maverick University. I'm your host, David Hallberg. Joining me today is Pastor Kyle Caviness, pastor in Willamette Valley Baptist Church in Aumsville, Oregon. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
You're here in town for a wedding, family event, and you're sticking over to preach chapel for us and to talk with me on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I've gotten to know you a little bit. Just want to give everybody a little bit of your background. Grew up in a pastor's home. Your dad pastored or was an assistant pastor down in Texas,
right.
For your grandfather,
right.
Bob Smith,
Mm-hmm.
there at Trinity Baptist Church in Arlington, Texas, and then your dad went to pastor in Oregon, and you were there, graduated high school in that place, went off to Bible college, and then started as assistant pastor back in Texas.
Right.
So, and then now in the last 5 years, have now been pastoring in Oregon,
right?
And so I really can't appreciate either location. I haven't been to Texas,
right.
Except for the Dallas-Fort Worth airport for a layover. And I've never been to Oregon either. I've been to the Pacific Northwest, but Oregon is never a place I've visited. And so I imagine each place brings its own challenges of ministry. And that's what I want to focus on today, just
Sure.
that transition of ministry, because as an assistant pastor, you have very specific roles. You know, these are your duties. And now, for the last 5 years, as a pastor, obviously you're taking a more holistic view of the ministry. So can you talk to us a little bit about just your experiences there in Texas and Oregon and just that transition from assistant pastor to pastor and even geographically how that's different for you?
Sure. Well, I was blessed to grow up in a pastor's home, which I think is a huge benefit. I know some pastors' kids that said, "Oh, it's a fishbowl," or all this other stuff, and resent some of the I guess way people would look at it or standard they're held to. But I only ever saw it, and I think this is really big credit to my parents. I only ever saw it as a blessing and an opportunity and just a real leg up. And so being able to go into ministry, there's an associate or a senior pastor after having grown up in a pastor's home. Boy, that was just such a help and a blessing.
What did they do to help you have that viewpoint? Because we recently actually recorded an episode, and I think it just aired a couple weeks ago, where I was talking with a guy about that topic and how
right.
he tried to help his kids.
Okay.
But now you are the pastor's
right.
kid.
Yes.
From your vantage point, what is the thing that helped you?
You know, I never felt like I had to compete with the ministry for my dad's attention or my mom's time or something like that. I never felt like it was an idea of, unfortunately it's been said, I'll give my life to the ministry and God will take care of my kids kind of idea. He never did that. And he found a way of including us in the ministry in a way that I felt like I was the luckiest kid on earth. I mean, everybody else has to go home. I go out and eat with a guest speaker and get to meet some of these men and talk to them and hear from them. And along with that came showing up 2 hours early and getting stuff ready and working when other people weren't working too. But just my dad's attitude about it, there was never a joy at church and then a venting, complaining at home. He just never, ever did that.
Okay.
And also, I never felt like I was missing out on anything, even in times when we weren't making a lot of money, little church, something else like that. The Lord blessed, and if we were lower than average income, I didn't know it. It's great.
Yeah.
And I think my dad did really well and taught us really well at the importance of priority, and the idea that priority isn't just thinking that something's important. In order to put something first, you have to put something second. And so in order to be right, putting something first, you have to put, if there's a conflict, it has to go that way. And he was just really good at taking care of his responsibilities and working and doing the church work in the ministry, but never making me feel like I was the leftover, and I never resented that. And then he was very consistent. And I never can think of a season of life at any point where he disengaged from us as a family. And because of that, I only felt like that was only a blessing and a help and a strength going into ministry and serving the Lord. And all my siblings are serving Him across the world, different places. Yeah. And so I think it's really, I think a real blessing and a tool for me growing up in a family where I haven't just heard what we're supposed to, how you should do it. I've seen it. And I've seen that it works, and trying really hard to do the same thing with my kids now.
What you said was perfect, especially about priorities.
Right.
Because I find myself in the same boat where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm making this a priority, but am I is the question, because you're right. Something has to come second. And when those things conflict, that's where the true test of what your priorities are.
Right.
So I think that's huge. And your attitude as well, you're saying that's just simply a reflection of your dad's attitude.
Well, for everyone who was privileged to grow up in a Christian home at any level, it blesses us because it starts resetting our defaults.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm really blessed. When I go on to autopilot, I autopilot back to the right way. Mm-hmm. Someone who's a first-generation Christian breaking those cycles, boy, they got a harder road than I do, because they've got to go back, and their defaults are not going to be the right way. They have to constantly fight that. So what a gift we can give our kids.
And I think that's why so many kids who grow up in Christian homes, they're so bitter, especially when they try to go the other direction, because they're fighting against their defaults.
True, you want that.
They're bitter at themselves, and they're just frustrated. Why can't I enjoy doing wrong when because they've been taught otherwise.
Right. Yeah. It's great when you have the Lord and the home working hand in hand on that front.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sin isn't an enjoyable place to live when you're the Lord's child, and when you have a good home and that kind of thing. Something to lose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you were there in Waco, Texas, serving as an assistant pastor, what kind of responsibilities did you have?
A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I was music from the beginning, so we did congregational choir, special music, some orchestra, all the rest, and really loved that. Growing up, musical home, my family sang a lot, so I just really enjoyed all of that. Mm-hmm. And then kind of anyone that's been assistant pastor for anywhere very long, you get a collection of things typically, and so I enjoyed a lot of that. I did all the tech and sound projection, live stream, that kind of stuff, and then helped with the school principal for a while, and then worked with outreach and soul winning ministries and teenagers and youth pastor for a while. So a little bit of everything. It was great. I think the Lord really used that to give me some experience and a taste of a lot of things I'd need, going forward. So
as you transition into the pastorate, obviously in 5 years, you've come across situations in the past 5 years. Well, COVID is kind of an exceptional thing.
Right, yes.
But if you were to talk to a young man who was like you were as an assistant pastor, in charge of music, teens, whatever the responsibilities might be, now looking back as the pastor of a church, obviously a pastor has a different view of the church ministry than the assistant pastor does, and it needs to have a different view. What were some things that, these are questions I wish I had asked. These are some things that, I didn't really realize until I was in that position. If you were to kind of give full disclosure to a young man who desires to be a pastor and transition from, that assistant pastoral role to pastoral role, what would you tell them?
I think I knew this to be true a little bit, but the more time that passes, the more truth I see in this idea. And it's something that we tell our young people, but I think it applies all the way up the chain. When it comes to transitions, I've just learned that it seems like we're always looking toward kind of the next thing. So when you're in high school, you're looking toward Bible college, hopefully. You're looking there and you're thinking, when I'm at Bible college, I'm going to be like this, and I'm going to be able to do that, and I'm going to have this experience and all the rest. And then you look toward marriage and family and ministry, and then the next stage of ministry. And there's this, I guess, idea in a lot of kids that by the time I get there, I'll be what I need to be, and I'll have the type of, there's a lot of lukewarm teenagers in churches that expect to have spiritual homes later, and that's just going to kind of be there.
Yeah.
And so we tell our young folks and tell our college students, develop a heart for the ministry now, even when the ministry isn't yours, when you're in college and you're working in ministries. And I think that same principle was so true. And the more time that passes, the more true I see it. It was really important for me as a staff member, as an associate who I didn't have a responsibility for, to the Lord, for the church personally. My senior pastor gave account like that. I had a responsibility for my ministries, but to ask the Lord to put in me from as early as possible, just a pastor's heart. Not everybody was in this boat. For me, I knew the Lord had called me to pastor and to be a senior pastor. Sometimes the Lord reveals His will in stages to folks, and they're just willing to minister, and He shows them. I knew from early on that the Lord wanted me to senior pastor at some point, and was happy to serve almost 10 years as an associate, learning and working and preparing and waiting on His time and His will for that transition. No rush for me there. I was loving it and really cherished all those memories and that preparation. But I do think that something I could tell that God started to do in me, and that I'm really thankful that I asked Him for, was just the word, Lord, would you start now putting the pastor's heart in me, and seeing people and working with people, having a burden for people in a way the pastor would, but form the pastor. It doesn't mean you're stepping in front of any of the pastor's relationship or roles. You stay right and ethical and all that kind of stuff. But just that pastor's heart and that view. I don't know any pastor anywhere that looks at a staff member and says, "You're seeing the big picture too much. Stop that. Just focus on the little thing. Stop worrying about these people and how they'll respond, and just worry about the details of your event or your ministry or something else like that." Like pastors, man, they were all about staff men seeing the big picture and having a heart for people and to help people and all that kind of things. And so I think going from the associate role to the pastoral role, one of the things that helped me the most was really asking God in advance. And this is something, again, that my dad counseled me in. And he said early on, I don't know when God's going to move you to a pastorate, but he says, I know he'll start putting that desire and that heart in you before he does. And in the years before that, he's going to start building that heart for people in you and to pastor people and help people and all of that. And so I think that was a big thing, not to wait until you're there to develop that and think like that, but to start in advance. And then along the way, to invest in that from a lot of different perspectives. We tell young people today, you need to, while you're in school and while you're in college and all the rest, you got to make sure that you're making wise decisions financially. That's going to serve you later on. Make sure you're making wise decisions with your health and fitness, that kind of thing, to have something where you can serve God well over the years. And I think the same thing is true in your ministry and in your different ministries that you're working in and your heart for people. If you know this is where God's taken you, then ask him to keep building that, even if it's down to, preparing more sermons than you're required to use. That's a challenge as an associate. I was busy. I was every minute. I was crazy busy all the time, doing everything. But I knew God's going to want me to preach one day, so I need to be busy preparing and studying and getting these questions answered in my own mind. And so I think one of the biggest takeaways I would have for people that would find themselves looking toward pastoring one day that are not there yet, don't wait to prepare and get the heart and pray that way, and even pray for those people before you know them. Don't wait until then. Get the burden ahead of time and ask God to build that into you. And when I look back, I see God doing a lot of things, very specific things in my responsibilities and experiences that was direct preparation for things he was going to have me do later. I'm thankful for that.
You talked about the pastor's heart, and I think one word that you use repeatedly defines what the pastor's heart is. It's people. Right?
Yeah.
And so many times people can be focused on the things of the ministry rather than the people of the ministry. And am I right in saying that's something that every person in ministry has to challenge themselves to do? You can be focused about planning details and events and blah, 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 what's the next bus promotion, rather than focusing on the people.
And it takes all of it. It takes everything. You have to do the events, and you have to plan, and you have to organize, and you have to administrate, and presbyteros, and that's one of the roles of a pastor. But I think that, it's got to come down to people and really making a connection between your relationship with the Lord and theirs, and people. I can't help them if I'm not close to him and his word. I may want to help them, may have a heart for them, but I can't. And so if I want to help them, I have to stay close to him in his word, studying and getting wisdom, because if I had been in the ministry and a senior pastor for 50 years, I might, whether or not I should, I might be able to fall back on experience for every answer and every counseling session and every issue that arises. But I'm not. I'm 5 years deep as a senior, and growing up in a pastor's home or not, I don't have every answer that's out there. And so, boy, I got to be on the same page with God. I got to be able to go to him and get answers, and go to his word and read it and understand it and be able to communicate it to other people. And so I think part of that investment in word and in study leads back to that heart for people. If you care about people, you've got to get in and learn and know the only thing that's going to help them. And it's not me. It's not my experience. It's his word.
So that heart of that pastor is kind of a spiritual preparation. You even mentioned a couple of more practical things, like just being in practice of writing more sermons than you would need to. That's a great idea. But you also mentioned financial. Can you talk a little bit about your experience? You talk about, I need to prepare myself financially to pastor a church one day.
Sure.
Making sure I'm not getting into debt. Obviously, you want to avoid negative things. But were there any positive steps that you took as well? Like, man, I want to make sure that I have, a nest egg or something, because every church situation is different. Some guys are going to pastor a church where, hey, we can't pay you a full-time salary. You're going to have to be bivocational.
A lot of it,
your situation?
I think a lot of it does come down early in life, just in making wise decisions that put yourself in a lot of people, the young mind says, this will work out if everything goes perfectly, right? So I can afford this house if everything goes right and I get the raise I'm expecting.
Yeah.
That's the way a lot of young people think that haven't maybe been through difficult economic times, and that may be different in the next generation. I don't know, but I think for me as a pastor, there was more at stake than am I going to be able to enjoy this or that or have this comfort or not? As a pastor, there's some places that I can go and I can pastor and I can be in God's will if I didn't have unwise decisions as a weight and a burden and a problem. And if I have those weighing me down, that's going to make it a lot harder to be where he wants me. So my goal was really, and I'm all for people doing the research and getting good advice and just being in a wise having wise stewardship with their money and looking toward savings and nest eggs and all that kind of stuff. That's great. There's a lot of, Ramsey will help you with all that kind of stuff or whatever else, there's a lot out there. But for me, it was just also looking past just the general wisdom of it and saying, if I keep this right, God's going to be able to use me in an easier way than if he's got to overcome my poor decisions to use me where he wants to. So that's just something I kind of kept in mind early on. There's a number of ways that I can make God's job using me more difficult. He's up to the task, but that's not really what I want my role to be with him, is making his will as difficult as possible. So I think it is important just to kind of see through that lens and when it comes to finances, I'm not an expert by any means. I'm certainly not independently wealthy because I, did one thing right as a college student. However, it's very easy to take any of those things like that you should do and to say, well, once I get to this point, then I will.
And there it is again.
You're never going to get to that
I'll
point.
wait till
It's
I've arrived
transition.
to arrive.
Yeah, same idea. That applies to so many things.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate everything you've told us, and I think it'll help a lot of young men who are in that situation of having a desire to pastor. They're not pastoring just yet, but man, what can I do now to make that transition happen a whole lot easier?
Sure.
And I think that's very helpful.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Maverick University, and make sure that you check out our other YouTube videos and also the audio-only platforms as well. Make sure that you like this video and that you share it with somebody who can be benefited by it. God bless you. Thank you very much.